And let's add custom energy to our block entity. Alright, we find ourselves back in Intelligent once more, and in this tutorial we're going to be adding custom energy via the Techreborn Energy API. Really awesome stuff, and well, I mean, let's take a look. So the first thing we'll do is just update to 1.19.2, just making sure that we have this. These are the current, well, basically the current values here. You can always take a look at fabricmc.net/develop to see the actual properties, the dependency as well, and that should be fine. And then, you know, it's going to build. Once again, can take anywhere from a few seconds up to a minute or so, and then everything should be fine over here as well. And then just to be sure to have everything, you can always add or always run the Gradle W gen sources over here, just to generate the sources, so you have those as well, and then you should be pretty much good to go. And now we can take a look at adding some energy. All right, now that that is done, let's go and see what we can see. So first of all, we of course have to add the Techreborn Energy API. For information, I suggest going to the Techreborn Energy repo over here. You can basically see that we have different values over here, and then there's the API, so we basically have to add this over here. Here they are the latest values, or the latest versions basically, and we're just going to, well, add this to our dependencies. So what we want to add is the following. I'm just going to copy this over, and then we'll see. So this is, as you can see, we're going to include the mod API, Techreborn Energy 2.2.0, and we're just making sure that we're excluding this group in particular, because, well, then it doesn't work if we actually add this. So that should be fine. And we will actually need one other thing, and that is going to be, we're actually going to add Techreborn as well, so the actual mod itself. And this is going to be done like this. So we're going to say mod implementation first.maven, then the name of the mod, and this is the number on CurseForge. So we're basically getting something from CurseForge, and then this is the number basically of the download that you have. And now we're going to add this, so just so that we have an example of some sort of generating energy, basically, that we can then use our block entity with, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to actually generate any energy. So we're going to add this. For that, we also need to add this under the repositories. That's actually very important that we add this CurseMaven over here, and that should be pretty much all that we need to do in this case. So this is going to add the Techreborn Energy API, and this is going to add the Techreborn mod itself to our project here in this case. Now let's just rerun the Gradle over here, and once again, this can take anywhere from a few seconds to a minute to maybe a few minutes even, and then after this we should get a build successful. There we go, actually 9 seconds. Of course, you know, I've already done all of this before, so it should be fine, and we should now have access to, well, all of the craziness that are going to be used for the Energy API. Let's start by going into our gem infusing block entity, and let's go to the very top over here, and we will first of all add the actual energy storage. This is going to be a public, a final, and this is a simple energy storage. You can see Techreborn Energy API base, so it definitely has been added properly, and this is going to be called energy storage. This is equal to a new simple energy storage, and here we actually put in the capacity. So capacity here, let's just say 30,000. The max insert, let's say 32, and then the max extract is also going to be 32 for the time being. I highly suggest when you play around with the numbers one way or the other, and also you just have to be open to experimentation on this basically. We want to make this an anonymous class, and we want to override the onFinalCommit method over here, and we want to call mark dirty. And that should be pretty much fine. We will add something else to here as well. We're going to need some custom networking in a moment, but we'll deal with that once we're basically done with this. We want to add the rest of this craziness first, and the rest of this craziness is going to be added in the following way. So now we have an energy storage here, in which we can basically add or subtract certain energy to. Now, the first thing we want to do is we actually want to make sure that the energy is written in the write and read NBT methods, of course. So let's just do this. So nbt.putInt. Actually, it's put long because the energy is actually saved as a long. This is going to be gem_infusing_station.energy. And we're just going to say energy storage.amount, and there you go. And then the same way over here, we're just going to say energy storage amount is equal to nbt.getLong. And that's going to be the gem_infusing_station.energy, making sure that we write the same key here and here. Then that should be fine. And now, in theory, the only thing that we're going to need to, well, get, the energy working is stuff inside of the tick method. So that's going to be the tick method over here. So the way that the energy stuff works is actually very interesting. So what I want to do is I want to do two things. When we look back at the texture for the GUI, right, we have this particular, let's go, there you go. So I have this particular slot over here that it should be used to insert some sort of fluid over here, but because we're dealing with energy first, what I want to do is I just want to, for testing purposes, have something in here that if I, for example, put in a gem over here, then the energy also starts going up. Just once again, this is for testing purposes only. I highly recommend playing around with these things as well, just so that you have a little bit of an idea. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a new, the new if statement here, and we're going to say has energy item, right? And this is going to be, once again, passing in the entity, of course, and this is going to be a new method. So let's actually make this method first. So let's create this. This really isn't anything crazy over here. We're pretty much just asking, hey, we're just returning, does the entity.get stack of in slot 0, right? Is that an item? And is that item, let's say tanzanite, for example, right? And if this is tanzanite, then we're going to just add a little bit of, where is it? There it is. We're just going to add a little bit of energy here. And how do we add energy? So this is one of the things that I am unsure if this is the exact way to do it. So if there are any experts for the API over here, please do correct anything in the comments below. I'll pin the comment or whatever. Now, I have done this in the following way. I have made a try statement and then a transaction from netmicrofabric transfer transaction over here. Well, transaction, this is equal to a transaction.openOuter, right? So this is an outer transaction. And what we're then going to do is we're going to say entity.energyStorage.insert, and we're going to insert 16 energy. We're going to pass in the transaction as well. And at the very end here, we're going to say transaction.commit. So we're basically putting in 16 energy after opening this transaction, and then we're going to say, okay, and then we want to commit this. So I believe that this is how it should work. The general idea is that if we don't commit it, then it's not actually going to be inserted, and this commit over here, the transaction.commit, should also then be used, or is used to then call this onFinalCommit method as well, which is going to mark the actual block entity dirty, which is exactly what we want. And then this later will also synchronize it to the menu and the client as well. So that's the general idea here. And that is one of the things that we want to do here. Now, when we have a recipe, that's great, but maybe we also want to check if there is enough energy. So has enough energy. There's going to be the entity over here. Once again, a method that doesn't exist. That's fine. Let's create it. And then here, we're just going to check, hey, let's see something about, maybe we're going to check the entity again. So entity.energystorage.amount, and maybe that has to be more than something like 32. So maybe we want to subtract 32 every tick or something like that, but we just want to basically make sure, hey, does this actually have enough energy to run anything? Okay, that's fine. And then instead of only increasing the progress, we now also want to extract energy every tick that we're doing stuff. So let's extract energy from this entity. Once again, this is a method that has not been created. I think that doing it like this actually makes more sense to sort of go through. And then how do we extract the energy in this case? Well, it's the same idea with this, right? The same try with a transaction, called transaction equal to a transaction open outer. And then inside of here, we're once again going to say entity.energystorage. This time we're going to say extract, and we're going to extract 32, passing in the transaction, and then we're going to say transaction.commit. Once again, if any experts are here and this is, not right or whatever, feel free to just comment down below anything like that. I'm totally open to hearing other ideas in this. Now, crazily enough, this is in theory all that we need to do to add the energy in this case, right? So this might be like, wait, what is that? That can't be everything. It actually is everything to add the energy itself. Now, of course, what we're not having yet is any display of the energy right here. That is a little bit more complicated. However, for completion's sake, I actually want to show you how this already works when we put a tanzanite into the first slot over here, right? This slot right here. And then we're not going to have any feedback over here. Without the thing in the slot, it's not actually going to work. And it's basically going to, well, not actually craft this because the actual entity itself doesn't have enough energy. Let's go into the game for the first time. Let's take a look at it, and then we're going to continue afterwards. All right, we find ourselves in Minecraft again, and first of all, you can see that Techreborn has been added here, so we have access to, all sorts of generators and all sorts of different things. So we can actually already take a look. Let's say, for example, I try to use the tin cable over here. You can see it actually does not connect right now. That's totally fine. We're going to take a look at that in just a moment. But for the, for the most part, in this idea, what we can do is, well, let's just take the raw tanzanite and put it in here, and it doesn't work, right? Why does it not work? Well, because there's no energy in here. Now, of course, we're not getting any display, but if I put a tanzanite in here, we're just going to wait a little bit of time, because every tick, it should add about, I think 16 was what we put in there, so it should add 16 every tick over here. Now, like I said, we're not getting any visual display, but when I now take it out and put a raw tanzanite in here, then it should actually start. As you can see, it might not finish because it might not be enough. Well, it actually was enough. That's fair enough. So you can see it basically uses the energy that it has stored, and then it actually does not have enough energy to finish the operation, but that's totally fine. The theory still goes that the energy itself actually does work, so that's really, really awesome. And, well, I mean, let's go and continue along and, well, I mean, see that we can, first of all, have this displayed properly inside of the menu over here, and then also that it works with the cables and all of that craziness, so that that all works as well. Let's take a look. Let's start with basically the capability of, well, having this, sided energy stuff. That's going to happen in the mod block entities over here. And what we're just going to do is we're just going to call energy storage.sided.register for block entity. And then we're going to have we're going to basically start to type block entity over here, and then it's going to make a by function over here. We're just going to say block entity.energy storage. And then the second parameter is the gem infusing station, and then all errors should go away. We just need to delete the last one over here. What is this? That is a comma that is not correct. Let me think about this. That's just one too many opening parentheses, and there you go. So that basically is going to register this particular block entity so that you can now also connect the cables to it, and then this should pretty much just work, and it should now work with this energy storage, and any other mod that uses the energy API over here should then pretty much work with this. So that's actually really awesome indeed. Right, so this was sort of the easy part to get this to work here, and now to actually display it inside of the inventory, that is a thing that is a little more complicated, but as I've said previously, now we're basically going to the big boy leagues, right? This is not the easy stuff anymore. Can be quite complicated. So if I recall correctly, what we basically need to do is we need to get the energy storage over here, right? This one. We need to get this synchronized with the client. Now we can do this via a new packet. That's totally fine, right? We can make basically a packet and send it to all the clients, and then the energy storage over here should also synchronize with the client, basically. However, for this, we first need to make a big change in the screen handler itself, and namely in the mod screen handlers, because currently this is a normal screen handler type. Now we want to actually make this an extended screen handler type. Now if we just change this, that's not the worst thing, but you can see first of all this new over here does not work. That's fine, because the only thing we basically need to change here is actually add a packet byte buffer over here. So packet byte buff, no buff, there you go, this guy. And we just want to import this class, and we're just going to call it buff over here. That's fine. And in the other constructor, we want to add instead of an inventory, we actually want to say block entity, called entity. There you go. And now we change this from a simple inventory to a following crazy thing, and that is inventory.player.getWorld.getBlock entity, and then passing in the buff.read block position. So we're basically reading, or we're writing in a block position over here, saying, hey, what we want to do is I want to write a block position of where this particular entity is, so that I have access to this particular block entity in the screen handler. This is actually quite important, otherwise a few things are not going to work. So what we can then do is we can then say over here entity.cast, and we're just going to cast this to an inventory, because we know that this is actually an inventory, so that is no worries at all, basically. We're going to do the same here. We're just going to cast this to an inventory. Let's actually copy this over. We're going to say inventory, and this is the entity. And then we also want another field over here, a public final, actually, gem infusing block entity, or block entity. And we're going to assign this after the property delegate, let's say. So we're going to say this dot block entity equals entity right here. Now this also doesn't work. You have to cast this, but that's fine. We're just casting the entity that we're passing in here as a gem infusing block entity. And I believe that should be pretty much what we need to do in this case, just so that we have access to this particular block entity. That's actually very important later in the screen. Otherwise, we actually can't display the energy there. So that's all fine, but then this actually prompts us to also change something inside of the block itself, if I recall correctly. Let's just make sure that that is the case inside of the gem infusing station block. There you go. In the onUse method, I believe what we need to do here is we don't want to do this. We now want to say world.getBlockEntity at position, passing in the position, and then casting this to a gem infusing block entity. And that should be what we need to do here. So like I said, it's a little bit different in this case, but this should now work fine. As I said, this can be quite complicated, so I might miss something, but well, as I've said, quite complicated in a lot of ways. There's a lot of things that we need to change basically everywhere, but that's going to be okay. Right, now in the block entity itself, we actually need to do the following thing. We want to change this from a named screen handler factory to an extended screen handler factory. Also extremely important. This will prompt us to actually implement another method that is a write screen opening data method. Let's actually move this up a little bit. Let's move this below the method where we create the menu. There you go, this one. And now here, what we actually want to do is we want to write this position, because that's the thing that we're going to need inside of the screen handler later. So we want to say buff.write block pause, there you go, and then just say this.pause. There you go, and that should be pretty much fine, and I believe all of the things that we need to change in the screen handler itself. So now what should happen is that the screen handler now has available to it the entire block entity, which then can also be used in the screen in theory. But the issue right now is that the energy at the moment is not synchronized from the server to the client, because that doesn't happen automatically. We now want to do this via a packet. Now for this, custom networking is required, but no worries. We've seen this previously, and we're going to do this again. So this is the energy sync. This is the server to client, so S2C packet over here. And what I will do is I will just copy over the contents of this. I think this should immediately work. I think that there are two methods that are not implemented yet. That's totally fine, of course. So the set energy level method, we basically have to also add to the gem infusing block entity. No worries at all. We're just going to do that. Let's just do it. I mean, it doesn't really matter where we put this, basically. Let's just put it here. There you go. So this is going to be the public void, and this is the set energy level, set energy, actually. There you go. Set energy, not storage, but set energy level. This is taking in a long called energy level, and we're just going to say this.energystorage.amount equals energy level. Now, this is only used to basically set the energy on the client itself, right? So we're basically sending the current level of energy that the server has stored, and we're sending it to all clients that are, basically to all clients. And when they access this particular block entity's menu, then they also have access to the energy level on the client itself. That's the general idea of what we're doing here, and that is why this craziness basically goes on. Overall, this shouldn't be anything too crazy. We're basically reading a block position over here. We're reading the energy level, then just making sure that, hey, is this particular block entity actually a gem infusing station? If it is, then we're totally fine. Then we're setting the energy level, and then we're also saying, hey, if the current screen that the player has open is the gem infusing screen handler, then we're also setting the energy level. So basically that it is synchronized every time that something changes on the block itself, and also while we have it open. That also then changes and synchronizes the energy level. I'm not 100% sure if this is necessarily needed, but I do like to have it. So there you go, basically. Right, so let's register this in the mod messages as well. So this goes in the register S2C over here. So client, play networking, register global receiver. We, of course, need a new identifier over here. This is the energy underscore sync. And, of course, here as well, energy underscore sync. And then we're just going to call energy sync. And that this is then the energy sync S2C packet : receive. And then end it with a semicolon, and that should pretty much be this registered, and it should also be working fine. Now, what we have is we would have access to the correct number of the energy, right, this amount, on the client after we're adding something into the final commit method over here. Now, what do we need to add here? Well, before, what we've seen is like sending something to one player, but how do we actually send something to all the players? Well, the first thing we want to make sure is that the world that we're on right now is not the client. Because if you actually do this for both the client and the server, well, first of all, it's going to crash because, well, the client can't send server packets to the client. That's not how it works, right? That's number one. And number two, if it would work, then what would happen is it would just like repeat itself forever, because every time it's received, the energy changes. So then, you know, it changes as again and again and again. So that is not what we want. So basically, inside of here, we want to make a new buffer. That's just the data. So let's say packet byte buffs.create. So we're creating a new buffer, and we're writing in, of course, first of all, the long. Nope, actually the long, that's what we want to write in here, and that is the amount. And then we also want to write the block position, and that is just the get pars over here. Remember that the buffer over here is read via this one right here. So we first want to write in the long, because that's the first thing we're going to read, and then write in the block position, because that's the second thing we're going to read. And what we then want to do is we want to basically for each loop for every server player entity called player, and we want to go through the player lookup dot tracking, and then a server world. Also, we need to cast the world basically into a server world, and then passing in the position here. And inside of this particular for loop, what we want to do is we want to say server play networking dot send to every player mod messages dot energy sync, and then passing in the data. So this will now send the actual amount and the block position of this particular block entity to every player that is on this particular, well, world, basically, on this server. And that should be pretty much all that we need to properly synchronize the data. Now we just need a way to display it inside of the screen. So now we find ourselves, when you think about this, purely on the client, right? Now, luckily, we have access to, as we have seen here, the handler. And luckily, the handler itself, when we go into the gem infusing screen handler, has access to the block entity. So therefore, we have access to the energy storage as well. That is really awesome indeed. Now, what do we need for this craziness? Well, I have sort of, what would I say? I've sort of done some crazy stuff over here, because I had the visual energy stuff done for Forge, and what I used was a pretty good class from Blue Sunrise, and we're just going to take a similar class here. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to make a renderer package here in the screen package, and then we're going to make a new class, and that is the energy info area class. Well, just making sure that we write this correctly. There you go, and that should be fine. Now, what we want to do is we also want an info area class. So this is going to be a new Java class called the info area class. There you go. And that should be okay. Now I'm going to basically, copy this over. The general idea here is that this has been done in a Forge version, and I'm now using it in this. So this is under the Blue's license of common sense. Pretty much just means don't go too crazy with it. This does apply to the Forge version. I don't think I've modified this one in particular, but I have modified the, I think I've heavily modified the energy info area, but just making sure, right, this is actually from Blue Sunrise over here, so just keep that in mind. The energy info area, I'm also going to copy over the entire class. It's a little bit longer, but as always, everything is available to you in the description below. GitHub repository and individual gist as well. And here is the same, right? Of course, Blue's license of common sense. I have changed a lot of this stuff around basically to be, to work with Fabric, but overall, it's going to be totally fine. With this, let's actually not call this FE. Let's just call this E for energy. Basically, I think that this is the denomination or the actual type of the SE type, if you want to, that the energy is stored in. So that's going to be called E. And that should be pretty much what we need. Now, we need this in order to, properly display this. So in this screen itself, what we're going to have is we're going to have an area, and it's going to look something like this. So beneath the texture, we're just going to have a private energy info area. We're just going to call this the energy info area. In the init, we're just going to make a new method called assign energy info area. I just like to have sort of a method for this. It's a little bit cleaner in that case. Just create this. And what is this going to entail? Well, it's going to assign the actual energy info area and make a new energy info area. What does this need? Well, we're going to basically, I'm going to put this in, and then you're going to say, well, this is pretty crazy. And it's like, yeah, but we'll see. So we're going to say width minus background width. and then divide all of that craziness by 2, and then after the closing parentheses plus 156, comma, and then the second one is going to be, this is height, actually 2 opening parentheses again, height minus background height in this case, divided by 2 plus 13. And then directly after it, we're going to say handler.blockentity.energy_storage. Now, what is this insanity? This pretty much just makes sure that the energy area is in the correct position, right? So this 156 over here and the 13, I believe, if I recall correctly, should be right here, that it knows that this is the energy area where it has the display. Because the energy info area doesn't only render the, well, basically a color inside of this particular part of the screen, it will also have a method that makes it so that when you hover over this area, you can actually see how much is in there, right? If you look at this energy area over here, the class, you can see get tooltips, and we're getting the amount of the energy and the capacity. So we actually can immediately see how much energy is in there by hovering over it. So that's why I really, really like this class, and I'm just a big fan of it, basically. So now the cool thing is that the energy area already has a draw method over here that we just need to add the matrix stack to. So in the draw background, we can just say energy info area.draw, and then passing in the matrices over here. And that will deal with all of the rest. Now there's one thing that we do need, and that is the tooltip. Now for the tooltip, I will be copying over the tooltip in this case, because the tooltip method, because it's a little bit more complicated. And once again, everything is available to you. So this will require the isMouseAboveArea method. And this is just a few helper methods. This will require a helper class as well as a few helper methods. As I've said, we're getting more and more complicated and more complex. So this is why sometimes there's some helper methods and stuff that we need. So first of all, we're going to get the mouseUtils over here. Once again, this is just a mouseUtil class, basically saying, hey, this is the position of the mouse X, mouse position Y, and then we're asking, okay, is this inside of this area, right? We're saying this is X and Y, and this is the size of it, and then is the mouse inside of this area? And then we're just having a few helper methods here that we're then using instead of 2 helper methods that we also need, or actually 1 helper method that we're just going to add right here. And you can see it pretty much does the same thing. We're just having a little bit of an offset, a little bit of a height and width. I wouldn't worry about it too much. I would basically ask you to, number one, play around with it a little bit, right? So because you can play around with the numbers, of course, right? You have everything here available to you. You can use it and then just try it out and see what you can basically find. This particular render energy tooltip is going to be called in another method, and that is the draw foreground method. Now, what we want to do here is we want to have X and Y available. That's going to be just copied over. So you can see X and Y is just width, background width. So this is pretty much exactly like this. We could also do the same thing in the assign energy info area. We're going to be fine though. And here we would then want to call the render energy area tooltips, passing in the matrices, mouse X, mouse Y, X and Y. And this should then also render the tooltip when we hover over exactly this area right here. And that would be pretty freaking awesome indeed. Now, looking at this, I believe that we should be done and everything should work. Now, because this is quite complicated, there might be something I've missed. Who knows? And of course, a little bit of a, issue actually snuck in, and that is right here in the screen handler. What we want to do is we actually do want to assign it right here, basically inside of the field, and then inside of here, we actually want to register it. So we want to say registry, making sure we choose a NetMicroFutural registry. Very important, make sure to choose the right class, registry.screenHandler, and then make a new identifier over here. Of course, tutorial mod ID, and then we're going to call this the gem_infusing. That's fine. And then after the first closing parentheses, comma, gem infusing screen handler. And that should register the screen handler correctly. And now I believe, hopefully, everything should work. All right, fans of in Minecraft, so let's see. Okay, everything works. Now, if I hover over the right part here, it should show me a tooltip, and there we go. That also already works, which is pretty freaking awesome indeed. Now, what we should actually find, if we put the Tanznet over here, right, we did this so that it adds some energy to it. So we should see not only a little bit of energy go up, but we should also see the 0 change. So let's see if that is the case. So the 0 changes, and we can even see something rendered there based on how much energy is inside of the block entity. This is freaking awesome indeed. Let's just like let this run a little bit longer just so that we have a little bit of energy inside of here. And then once there's enough, then what we can do, let's just get rid of this. We can see it stopped. And if we put a raw tensonite in here, we should even see this drop now. Because of course it's using energy as it is crafting something, and now it has stopped. Absolutely amazing. We can also see that the tin cable now actually, well, basically properly connects to the block entity itself. Now this is a 32E per tick, so this is exactly how much this can accept. So what we should be able to do is just take a generator over here. Let's just take the normal generator. This is an output rate of 32. That's great. And then let's just take coal over here. And in theory, what should happen is if I put the coal in here, we should see this go up. And indeed, it does go up. Absolutely freaking amazing. Exactly how you would expect it to work. And if we put this one in here, now it actually will go down quite significantly faster, as you can see, than it goes up. I am unsure why this is the case, because this should be the same, right? It should take 32 per tick to, well, basically craft, and it should also be, well, basically be fed 32 per tick. So I'm unsure why this is the case. However, there might be some issues that need to be ironed out in the future, but overall, it does definitely work, and this is freaking awesome and the first step to making a insanely cool block entity for your mod. Right, and that concludes this tutorial right here. As always, all of the code is available to you in the description below, GitHub repository and individual gist as well. I hope you found this useful and you learned something new, and I'll see you all in the next tutorial. So, yeah.